Hello and welcome to Big Weekend here on the Football365 show. I'm Mark Smith. I'm here as ever with Editor-in-Chief of Football365.com, Sarah Winterburn. Lots to talk about this week as ever. It's international break, everybody's favourite part of the season. We'll be talking about England against Belgium primarily, but other bits as well about the squad in general. And we'll be talking about a little bit about Lukaku and De Bruyne as well. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget you can like and subscribe and press the little notification bell so you never miss a show going forward. That's about it really, so yeah, nothing else to say other than this is Big Weekend brought to you by Paddy Power. Right, Sarah, let's start with Jude Bellingham, very, very new addition to the squad. A couple of injuries have given him a bit of a clear path into there. He's 17. What can we expect from him?
Well, apparently he made up the numbers on Monday with the England squad, and then Gareth Southgate liked him so much that he overlooked all the zillion other options for deep-line central midfielders to call up Bellingham. Obviously, there are no other options. We have got a massive dearth of that kind of player. So much of a dearth that we've already become to rely so heavily on Declan Rice, and obviously called up Calvin Phillips quite early in his Premier League career, almost before his Premier League career, really. So we've sort of stumbled on Jude Bellingham, who looks like the full packet or the full package. He's tall.
The full packet, yeah.
The full packet. He looks like a full packet. He looks a great player. The bits I've seen of him, obviously we're not seeing that much of him now because he's in Dortmund, but that in itself is a massive tick, isn't it?
Absolutely.
He's playing in a Dortmund side in the Bundesliga in central midfield at that age. People make comparisons with other players who've come through really early, like Theo Walcott, Dele Alli, etc. But these are all attacking players. It's a lot easier to come through as an attacking player than it is as a sort of holding midfielder, which we always think instinctively takes a lot of experience and takes a lot of know-how, and it's the kind of role that you sort of build into or grow into.
You get good at it in your mid-20s, don't you? Generally?
Yeah, generally, yeah. I mean, he's not a holding midfielder in the an Eric Dyer style holding midfielder. He's going to play in there with another player. But that is how England playing at the moment, particularly in this sort of the 3-4-3 formation. They are going to play two in the middle, and to try Bellingham in that role is an absolute no-brainer, I think. And also to have a look at him, a really close look at him, and see whether he's good enough for this level.
Absolutely. You mentioned there the 3-4-3. I want to talk about that. Is that set in stone now, do you think? Is this the system that Southgate likes? And is it because of a lack of trust in his centre-backs, or is it because he sees something more?
I think it's a little bit from this column and a little bit from that column. He tried to move away from that after the World Cup, because obviously we did brilliantly in the World Cup, but we were limited in what we could do with that formation. It makes you hard to beat. It doesn't necessarily make you a great side going forward. And we did massively over-rely on set pieces and our defensive solidity during the World Cup. He tried to move away from that, and quite frankly, it didn't really work. We don't have that strength in depth at centre-half anymore. And if we use that system, then we get the best out of players like Kyle Walker, whose England career looked over if we went back to a back four. Now absolutely right back in the mix again. A lot of people have a problem with this formation because it has no space for a number 10 really. You haven't got, which is why we have these long debates about Jack Grealish, James Maddison,
Mason Mount,
Ross Barkley, Mason Mount. Mason Mount only fits in that system because he's a player who will make himself fit into a system. Which is why he's got this sort of teacher's pet reputation, which is massively unfounded, but. It's not a formation that's probably going to make us European champions, but it'll get us there. And I think at the moment, no one's pretending that Gareth Southgate is the greatest manager since Alf Ramsey or anyone in between. But he recognises that where England's strengths are, and they are in that speed of movement up front, in Sterling, in Rashford, in Sancho, and then Kane dropping in. And you could argue that with Kane there, you don't really need a number 10 because he'll create the chances as well. But it does make us a little bit. A bit soggy, isn't it? It just feels a little bit stodgy.
There feels like there's no real link between midfield and those three forwards is my issue. Without that link in play, if we're going to play two holding midfielders as well as essentially five defenders, it just feels a bit, stodgy is the right word, but defensively more solid. And I would fancy us actually to get a clean sheet in that big game against Belgium. By the way, you'll see odds for a variety of bets throughout the show as we go on, so keep an eye on that. I want to move on to something we seem to talk about a fair bit with England, right backs, because we've got genuinely, I think we've got the best group of right-sided fullbacks in world football. We know the big players. We know about Trent. Obviously, he's out of the next, I think, 4 or 5 weeks. But the likes of Reece James looks very solid. Wan-Bissaka, defensively superb. But then, Tariq Lamptey, who I know you love. James Justin looks great. I mean, what's happening?
I don't quite know what it is. I guess over the last few years, we've had this sort of thing, haven't we, where potential wingers or potential central midfielders almost start at right back or have a game at right back. It's almost like Premier League football works like Sunday League, where if you're a decent midfielder, you can probably play right back, and a winger can play right back. And a lot of those players are converted from another part of the field. Alexander-Arnold came through as a midfielder. Wan-Bissaka came through as a winger. Very few of them are sort of career right backs. But what you end up with is a massive amount of really good footballers at right back. And we've got this wonderful sort of stream of them at the moment, haven't we? And the problem is, Alexander-Arnold has never really played very well for England. And for some reason, whatever, we keep thinking that the wing-back system will suit him. And it really doesn't, because he's too far up the pitch. He gets there too quickly. He needs to get the ball sort of just inside the opposition half to really do some damage, with those in-swinging balls. Reece James was excellent and until he got sent off for being a silly potty-mouthed young boy. And
is that the official referee's report?
Yeah, that's exactly what it said, yeah. He might be the future, actually, because he does combine the defensiveness of Wan-Bissaka with the attacking prowess of Alexander-Arnold. Much better at defending than Trent, and much better going forward, and far better going forward than Wan-Bissaka. And the avoidance of Wan-Bissaka does lend itself with this, to the 3-4-3 formation we were talking about, because he ain't a wing back by any stretch of the imagination. And so Reece James is probably as sort of well thought of as anybody in that setup at the moment.
Yeah, he'd be my first choice, actually, Reece James, for the exact reasons you mentioned. Wan-Bissaka I'd have in the squad just in case we come up against a team with a outstanding individual who we need to shackle. I think he's the best person we've got to be a man marker if we ever do that sort of job. Let's move on. I want to talk about our opponents on Sunday. Belgium, I mean, it feels like, this might be wrong and they'll probably come back to haunt me, but it feels like they've missed out a little bit on their own golden generation. I mean, Lukaku, so we'll talk about Lukaku. Whenever he scores a hat-trick in Serie A, we all say, oh, look, that's what United need. But I think for both parties, both for United and Lukaku, that was the best move, wasn't it?
It's a great deal. Both clubs and Lukaku, like you say, coming out of it better. He went for a very similar amount, so he avoids that sort of the stain of sort of losing his value over a couple of years at United. He had moments where he looked great, and then moments where he clearly didn't fit with how United want to play. If they want to play with this sort of attack pace up front, which is obviously where they're trying to go, Lukaku doesn't really fit that, and his first touch is probably not good enough to play that kind of football. But he's clearly an excellent finisher, and his fitness in Italy has never been questioned in the same way it was in England. This Belgium side, we talked about them 7 or 8 years ago as dark horses. Then they became one of the favourites without ever actually looking they might win anything. It felt like they were almost an England like sort of quarterfinal, semi-final side, never quite looking like they might go further. I think they may have missed the boat, because what they did have at that time, sort of 7 or 8 years ago, was a massive array of brilliant centre halves and defenders. Now they've all sort of either retired or come towards the end of their careers. They may have missed the boat on that Alderweireld company, Vertonghen. But this was a defence so good that Vertonghen played at left back as a matter of course. Belgium have had to move on from that, and defensively they don't look that great. Someone like Dedrick Boyata still gets games for Belgium, and he couldn't get near a Premier League side. Lukaku, I love him. I think they've got some great players. Obviously, Eden Hazard is in and out of fitness. That's a massive issue. But then they've got De Bruyne. So, in
perfect.
They've got a far greater player than England have got.
Well, let's talk about De Bruyne then, because there's been a lot of chat on the Football365.com website over the last sort of week or so. A lot of questions about, is he a big game player? And I thought, when I first heard that, well, that's nonsense. Of course he is. Then I thought about it a bit more, and actually there's quite a few examples where he hasn't really shown up in the big games. I mean, take out the Liverpool penalty miss. That can happen to anyone, it turns out. But is he a big game player? Is he someone you can absolutely rely on in those big games? And
I
by
mean,
the
I
way,
think
I'm not saying that Belgium-England is a huge game. We can pretend it is, but it's
the
not.
Nations League, it's the big one. It's the
Yeah.
you know, forget the Champions League. He was excellent against Real Madrid last season in the Champions League. A lot of people would say stepped up there. I think the problem at the moment is this City side's not quite working. It's got some of the component parts, but not all of them. And it's without Aguero up front, too much of the responsibility then falls on De Bruyne to not only set up the chances but also finish them. It feels like they're looking to him all the time to do something amazing. Raheem Sterling's not been in fantastic form. Torres is just settling in. Mahrez in and out, always in and out.
Yep.
And Foden obviously is not old enough or wise enough to be doing it week in, week out. And without David Silva, then you're left with De Bruyne as the main man. And you saw that in that Liverpool game. They go back to him and go back to him and go back to him. And it's almost like, right, if the door's going to open, it's going to open through him. Is he underrated? Is he overrated, underrated, wumbling free? No, he's a phenomenal player, the best in the Premier League, in my opinion.
Is it still?
Yes, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I think he's phenomenal, and I do want to see him do well. Just ideally not against England. Right, that's all we've got time for this week. Thank you, Sarah, for joining me. Thank you guys at home for watching. This has been Big Weekend, brought to you by Paddy Power. If you want to get in touch with the show, you can email us. It's the editor at football365.com. I guess we'll see you same time, same place next week.
Always.
Cheers.